Welcome to episode 7 of the podcast, the thoughts for this week, week 33, 2024. So this is going to be a weekly event, fairly short, but we're going to just go through what's happened this week, what we're seeing, and hopefully it could be of some interest to those who are listening. So first and foremost, attending INFOSEC. I went there as the CEO on Tuesday, the first day of the event, and primarily to strengthen the supplier and partner relationships we have. It was a brilliant event. I love this one. This is the best, probably for us, of the year. Every time you go, you bump into people you've met and worked with for years. So it's a superb event. Very worthwhile, tiring day. I had a very good discussion with BlackBerry. Had some new discussions with some new vendors potentially, and some existing channels as well. So it was well worthwhile going for everything, really. So from my perspective, there's no substitute for in-person meeting. I think in the dark times of COVID, if you remember, that wasn't possible. You had to do everything remotely, and I don't think there's a substitute for doing that. The event this year was particularly busy. I think day 2 and day 3 were busier than day 1. But there's an awful lot of new vendors coming to market, and you've got your usual big players, the incumbents in a lot of companies. But what's nice to see is that you get this refreshing new dynamic of new vendors coming into market. And the challenge for us as a VAR is making sure we are sifting through what we already have to see if that's relevant for you as customers. And if not, then we move on to other things. But it's a constant battle, to keep things moving forward, because it changes so quickly. I've never been in a sector as fast-moving as cybersecurity in all of my career. So it was a good event. Anyway, so one of the other things we've done is to look at the NIS2 directive, working with a company called RivaSoft, one of our suppliers. And there is a very interesting blog which we're going to be putting out as a podcast shortly, about the NIS2 directive, and it's a directive, not a regulation. So it has legal implications for directors. If it's in Europe, if you're trading with companies in Europe as part of your organisation, then it could have major impact for the board level folks within a company to be compliant from the cybersecurity perspective. And this is fairly new. But it has a major implication for things. If you remember back to Sarbanes-Oxley years ago, it's not dissimilar from that. But if you're trading in Europe, then it could be applicable to you. If not, then there may be new government directives coming out of the UK over the coming months that mimic or copy closely what this is in Europe. A bit like what we did with GDPR in 2018, I suppose. So that's we'll look out for that podcast coming out in the next few days or so. One of the other things I wanted to mention was our customers are constantly, we're seeing, massively cost conscious. A lot of companies are making decisions in basically sweating the assets they've already invested in. But even if it's new, they are very, very tight on the pricing. And that's obviously down to budget constraints. I believe a lot of capital expenditure is being cut right back in boards, in companies. So 2 options on there. One is you don't have the security that you need really to make sure you're preventative, or you keep the costs to an absolute minimum. So one of the things that we do to respond to that is we have an MSSP set of capabilities in different areas that move the cost into more of an operational expenditure model, which is monthly, and that is in response to this cost drive down. And I think the macro environment at the moment is to play here, because there's a lot of tightness in the markets, and to counter that, of course, the nature of the cyber threats is significantly more serious than it used to be. You're probably all aware of that, but as a result of that, then you do need to put some decent cybersecurity in place, but you can't ignore it because, one, from a regulatory perspective, Cyber Essentials Plus, for example, ISO 27001, not that many companies we're speaking to have got that yet, but then there's a new act called the DORA Act, which is coming in for January next year. If you're a financial services company, that would have an implication for yourselves. But that links back to ISO 27001. That's going to be another blog we're going to be sending out soon to get some detail, if you like, on that one. So back to the point, the customers were seeing a cost conscious, and the other thing we're doing and seeing is that the requirements seem to be changing. So, for example, initially we were involved in two opportunities where they wanted to either shift their endpoint protection solution to something new and have a managed service wrapper around that. So you had an outsourced team. So rather than creating your own security operations center, you could use a third party who could do it for you at a fraction of the price than doing it yourself, but either keeping your existing endpoint protection or replacing it. That was where we were with a couple of opportunities we had. And then they've changed the rules. They wanted to integrate the network level security SIEM log files and other sources and put that as part of the overall XDR solution, which is more holistic and takes into account things other than just the endpoint protection product, so EDR capabilities. So there's also changing in the customer's requirements. It is not static. So at the moment, there's a lot of movement going on in the marketplace. Anyway, that's that. So the other thing I wanted to just briefly mention was we did a podcast this week with Telesoft, one of our partners, where they're looking at the capability of integrating the network level traffic to an endpoint protection solution, but treat it pretty well as a complete managed service. And that's described in episode 6. There are some uniques to Telesoft because of their history. They're a UK company, but it's worth a listen. It's about 20 minutes, a bit longer than normal, but it may be worth a listen for you. So that's it, really, for this week, the first one. Any feedback would be gratefully appreciated if this is relevant for you. But don't forget to subscribe to the podcast channel. We're on Podbean, Spotify, and now YouTube. We've got a YouTube channel as well. So subscribe to one or more of those platforms, and then you can be alerted as new podcasts become available.